Kia ora tātou everyone, and welcome to this edition of InFocus, a TLA podcast. I'm your host Michael Andrew, and each episode we will be sitting down and talking to an inspiring guest connected to the legal sector, listening to their stories as they share their experience, and in the process explore some of the significant work that is being done behind the scenes that impact the industry and our communities. Our guest today is the enigmatic, charismatic, ex-marathon running, tattoo sporting president of the Law Association, Tony Herring. Tony is a partner at Gibson Sheat lawyers in Wellington, where he specialises in commercial and property law, providing advice to everyone from government departments, SMEs and individuals. Tony, thanks so much for joining us today. We're really grateful to have you in here and for you to take time out of what surely must be a very busy schedule. So the bar is set very high for this podcast. We'll be expecting lots of charisma and eloquence. But I guess what I wanted to know is, with public speaking, you obviously really enjoy it. I would venture to say that you have a lot of fun. At least that's what it appeared to be. Would that be a fair assessment, that it's quite an important part of what you enjoy?
Yes, I think I'm confident at doing it, and that's borne out by the fact that I was in the debating team at Rotorua Boys High in the mid-'80s, and so I've got my English teacher, Mr. Gillespie, to thank for that. And I was always a confident public speaker, and I was also fluent in Te Reo Māori, and in my Te Reo Māori career, I used to travel to all the local marae around Te Arawa, and would often win the whakōrero competitions, and really immersed myself in that whole Te Ao Māori. And I think that really helps with the confidence in terms of public speaking, to be able to do that in a marae setting as a white boy from Rotorua in the 1980s, and now to be able to use those experiences at a venue like the Northern Club, which used to and still does to a certain degree make me feel a little bit nervous in that setting with the Attorney General. But it's a really good segue into one thing I wanted to say to you, Michael, which is that I am really grateful for all these opportunities that I get to experience as president. I would never have had the opportunity to sit down and have breakfast with the Chief Justice or the Attorney General, or have coffee with the Chief Justice in her chambers at the Supreme Court, or meet these ministers that I've been meeting to talk about the Law Association. I'm really grateful for those opportunities, and they really do excite me.
What's that experience been like for you since the start of your term, shall we say, I guess, operating at this level and meeting the people that you meet through your role and through your position, I guess, advocating for the Law Association? What's that experience been for you, and that transition from what you were doing before?
It wasn't so much of a transition because I was on the council for 6 years, and I've previously had a number of roles in the profession, say with the New Zealand Law Society, for example. So I've had quite a number of years sort of leading up or building up to becoming president, and I had the fantastic opportunity to be vice president to Marie Dyberg, KC, or QC as she then was. And Marie's a great mate of mine and a great support to me as well. But that was a really good opportunity to learn from her. She's got a very high profile, and she's clearly an amazing public speaker and very well connected. So I learned a lot from her. But when I started in the role as president on my own, there were a lot of sort of pinch me moments. And one of the first ones was when I was in the Chief Justice's chambers in the corner office at the Supreme Court, having coffee with her and just having this lovely conversation, and pinched myself thinking, how did I make it here? Do I deserve to be here? You get a little bit of the imposter syndrome every now and then as well. So I still pinch myself sometimes when I get to be in the beehive talking to ministers, and this morning I had a meeting with all the heads of benches, so the Chief District Court Judge and the Chief High Court Judge, and talking about the issues that really matter to our members. I love it. It's great. It's really exciting.
Great. Good to hear. Well, we've got a lot to chat about today, and only 40 minutes now to talk about it, and very little of it actually involves the law. It's going to be about marathons,
yes,
and injuries and transformations, and the journey that you've taken, because I think a lot of people find that really compelling. your background and I guess what you do in your personal life. And last year we did a story in Law News about your upcoming marathon in Antarctica.
Yes.
Which was obviously very fascinating for a lot of readers and a lot of people. How was that? How did that go?
It was tough.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. It was an incredible experience. That was my 20th marathon, and it was my 7th continent, and it's my final marathon. I'm never running again. I don't think I could now. I've blown both my knees out over many years of running. I was initially I started my marathon running career about probably 20 years ago, and it was just going to be a 5K run in Hagley Park. So 2002, I became a partner of what was then called Simon Mortlock Partners, and the firm every year in Hagley Park would take part in this event called the Corporate Challenge, and it was a 5K fun run in Hagley Park, and I would always make excuses as to why I wouldn't do it. And I'd blame an old rugby injury to my knee, or I'd blame being too busy, but the truth was I didn't want to embarrass myself by not being able to run 1K, let alone 5Ks. But then I became a partner in April 2002, and I thought to myself, I'm now a leader of this business. I'm a partner, I'm an owner. I need to actually show the way and participate in this fun run now. Funny thing to think, but I thought I should really, lead the way. So I went home and I said to my family then that I was going to go for a run, and I had a 3 or 4 year old daughter. What was that? She would have been 4. No, she would have been 6. So I had a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old at home, and I said, Daddy's going for a run. And everyone looked at me thinking I'd gone mad because Daddy didn't go running. And I couldn't even run to the nearest power pole. Without stopping. I was so unfit, and I'd never run growing up. But I persevered, and I really put my mind to it, and I managed to run this 5K event in Hagley Park. And I think I did it in 26 minutes or something, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then I just carried on, and then I thought, well, if I can run 5 kilometres, imagine if I could run the City to Surf. That's 12 kilometres, so I did the City to Surf. And that finished in the old QE2 Stadium, which is where they had the 1974 Commonwealth Games, and I felt like I was Rod Dixon or Dick Quacks or John Walker crossing the finish line. And I got the buzz, and I really got into the running, and then I ended up doing a half marathon, and I travelled a little bit with half marathons, and then I thought to myself, well, if I can do a half, I can do a full. So I did the Christchurch Marathon in about 2005, and then I did it again the next year, and then I ended up going to do the Sydney Marathon, and I did the Gold Coast Marathon, and then I ended up doing London and New York, and I finished my marathon running career part 1 in New York. So I crossed the finish line. That was my 10th marathon. I thought, that's great, double figures. I've done 10 marathons, and I finished in New York, which is one of my favourite cities in the world. And then I stopped running for a while, and I ended up breaking my neck, and I ended up in the hospital for 3 months, but off work for 6 months. And while I was lying in the hospital bed, one of my best mates came over from Australia and convinced me to run to compete in the Ironman.
Okay.
And I was quite high on morphine, I think, at the time, and he said, we have to do something epic to celebrate the fact that you've broken your neck but didn't die, so let's do the Ironman. And I agreed to it. So I couldn't swim, but I learned how to swim properly and cycle and run, and so I did the Taupo Ironman in 2013. And then the marathon bug hit me again, because sometimes I have an element of OCD. Yeah. And I couldn't then finish my marathon running career on 11. Okay. Because that's an odd number. So then I decided to do the 6 World Marathon Majors. Yeah. So I had done London, I'd done New York. And then I decided to do the other 4, which was Chicago, Boston, Tokyo, and what was the other one? Berlin.
What was your favourite?
New York, probably. Yeah? I lived in New York for a year when I was an AFS exchange student in 1989 to 1990, and I've got some great friends over there, and it's just an iconic event. 2 million people on the sidelines supporting you, so the whole way around you're just being cheered and phenomenal.
I'm not a marathon runner by any stretch of the imagination, but what is it like? Do you get to take in the sights when you're running a marathon, or are you purely just focused on just the road in front of you?
A bit of both, really. It's focusing on getting to the finish line because it is quite painful, but I did some pretty iconic events. So
Yeah.
running through New York or running through London and running over all those amazing bridges and past the Tower of London. You get to experience the city in a way that you don't always get to have that opportunity.
It's quite a good tourism opportunity,
yeah.
almost.
Berlin,
right?
we ran past the Berlin Wall, the remnants of the Berlin Wall.
Take a camera with you.
Yeah, a lot of people do. Yeah.
Wow.
I try not to. I didn't have any additional weight to carry around. So I did all of those, and then I thought, well, I've done the 6 World Marathon Majors, and I got the medal in Tokyo to celebrate that achievement. And then I thought, well, I may as well carry on and do the 7 continents, because I'd already done, I think, 4 by then. So the other really good thing I enjoyed about marathon running is that we could wrap a trip around it. So when I did a marathon in South America, I picked Rio. And so my now wife and I flew over to Buenos Aires and had a few days there. And then we flew to Rio de Janeiro and we had a few days there. And I did the marathon. And then we ended up going further up into Brazil. And we saw the Iguazu Falls from both sides. And so we had these great epic holidays around it. And Africa, I ran a marathon in a game reserve with lions and elephants and all the wild animals on the course, and we wrapped a trip around that through South Africa and up into the Masai Mara, and ended up in Tanzania and Zanzibar, and we're just so fantastic experiences, and get to tick these things off the bucket list. So then I had Antarctica left. And that's a thing. The Antarctic Marathon's a thing.
Yeah.
So I entered the Antarctica Marathon 2020, and I had done all the training over an 18-week period of time, running 5 days a week, swimming as my cross-training. I had packed my bag. I had even gone down to the local camera shop in Christchurch and rented a really good quality camera so I could take photos of all the wildlife in Antarctica. And I had packed my bag. I'd flown from Christchurch to Wellington, where my wife lived at the time, and 3 days later we were flying to Auckland and then over to Antarctica, or to South America, and then jumping on the boat. And COVID stopped it. Yeah. So I was pretty devastated because I had done all the training and literally had my bag packed ready to go, and they cancelled it. So it was another 3 years before I got that opportunity and had to go through all that training again. Yeah. And training in the Hutt Valley in the middle of summer for a marathon in Antarctica was not ideal preparation. Someone suggested to me, I'm fortunate enough to be on the board of a local craft brewery company in Christchurch called Two Thumb, and they suggested that I put a treadmill in the chiller room with all the kegs of beer and train in the chiller room. I didn't think that would be very good for the treadmill. Yeah. So no, I just trained as normal. And Antarctica was brutally hard. Yeah. It was a 3.5 kilometre point-to-point course that you did 6 times. So you ran from the Russian research base on King George Island to the Uruguayan research base and then back. Yeah, I suppose there's very limited
kind of places you could create a loop or what have you. It could be quite hazardous.
And a lot of people said that must have been really boring because you're just literally running for 3.5 Ks, turning around, running back and doing that 6 times. But on one side you had the ocean, the Southern Ocean, and on the other side you had all these icebergs, and you were running towards this glacier that just puts Franz Josef and Fox Glacier into the shape. They were just incredible sights. And there were seals and penguins, and it was just phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's hard, it's still just such a worthwhile experience going there, right? And seeing it with your own eyes.
Yes.
So what did you get out of the marathons? Was it purely a sense of achievement, or did you just feel this kind of physiological buzz when doing it? Like what was the trigger for your, I guess, passion and zeal for it?
I think it was the endorphins that I got after a good long run. It just made me feel fantastic. And I remember one time I was training for a marathon, and the day before I had a long run. I think I had to go for a 19K run or something the next morning. And I was doing some work at home, and I fell off a ladder and I twisted my ankle, and it had swollen up massively. But I was driven to go for that 19K run the next morning because it was on my training schedule, so I had to do it. My ankle was still so swollen I could hardly get my foot in the shoe. And the first couple of Ks were agony, but then I sort of warmed up and did it. And I ended up going to the doctor that week because my ankle wasn't getting any better. And I explained to him that I was a bit dumb that I went out and did this 19K run with a badly swollen ankle. But he explained to me that the chemical reaction that the endorphins caused in my brain was similar to the chemical reaction an addict gets when they take a hit. And he wasn't joking.
Yeah.
So he told me I was addicted to the drug, the endorphin, in the same way that an addict has to go and get another fix. So even though I knew in my brain that I had this potentially broken ankle, my brain needed that hit of that endorphin by doing the 19K run.
Yeah.
So it was, you could say it was an illness.
Did you go
or an addiction.
Did you go through withdrawal symptoms when you stopped running? Were you like...
I don't think so, because we were in Antarctica. And I had just run and I knew it was my final marathon. And it hurts, right? Yeah. And this was agony, this race. Yeah. And so I knew that was going to be my last. And then we spent a week sort of kayaking in Antarctica and exploring, the Antarctic Peninsula on this ship. And so it was a good way of weaning myself off.
Yeah. And a broken neck, that's a terribly severe injury. How did that happen?
Do you want the truth or the...
the unadulterated version would be great.
One of my solicitors that worked for me back in Christchurch, a guy called Rob Glass, who's now a very successful music lawyer in Sydney, had handed in his resignation. He was going to move to Sydney because he wanted to become this entertainment lawyer that we just could not provide him the level of work that would satisfy him in New Zealand. So I was a bit sad that Rob was leaving, and we went out for lunch to celebrate his leaving, and then we pushed on to the Canterbury District Law Society annual ball, basically, or law dinner, and I lost my balance, fell 3.5 metres and hit my head on the marble floor of the town hall, and suffered what's called a hangman's fracture. So it was a complex fracture of my C2, and the C2 is the second highest vertebrae in your spinal column, and bruised my spinal cord.
Yeah.
And had my spinal cord been severed or cut, I would have died.
Yeah.
Because the C2 has all the nerves that control your breathing and your speech and everything. So the doctors said that the most common consequence of that injury is instant death. The second most common consequence is that you're a tetraplegic, and you have no movement from your neck down for the rest of your life. And the most unusual consequence is what happened to me, which is that after 3 months in traction, I walked out.
Wow. Was it? I mean, I could still imagine it's a really tedious and vexing process, the recovery, right? Even though you were able to recover relatively quickly. What was that like for you?
It was horrific. It was just horrific because I was at the time, right, I'd run all these marathons and I was really active. I'd actually been to the gym that morning. And then all of a sudden I have to lie on my back for three months, 13 weeks, you can't move. And I actually lost 25 kilos in that process. I had weighed myself at the gym that morning and I was 93 kilos. And when I came out of traction, I was 68.
Wow.
And I'm quite tall, so I was gaunt because you can't eat solid food when you're lying on your back in traction. I had 10 kilos of traction holding my neck in place.
And were you in hospital that whole time?
The whole time, 13 weeks. And the hardest part about it was that the doctor, the spinal doctor, who's brilliant, Raj, would come around every week and he would he didn't give me false hope, but he would often say, I think we'll just do 1 more week in traction or 2 more weeks in traction. But every time he said that, and he said that a lot over 13 weeks, it was just devastating because it was just hell being in traction for 13 weeks. So if I thought it was only another week, I could get through it. But then he would come back the next week and say, oh, no, it'll be another week and another week.
So that whole 13 weeks, you didn't know whether there would be a recovery?
No, they were pretty confident there'd be a recovery because I had movement in my limbs and whatnot, and it was just because of where the injury was, they couldn't operate. They could have, but it was more risky to operate because if they had slipped or whatever, then I was never walking out of there again. So the best solution was to lie as still as I could for 13 weeks and let the bones heal themselves.
They
can't put a cast on your neck, unfortunately.
No, but I can definitely see where the the passion for movement and marathon running comes from. When you go through something like that and you get a new lease on your body, basically, you're just going to go hard, I imagine. So you must have just been filled with this appreciation and gratitude for what you had and how the movement that you had as well.
I think there is an element of that, and a lot of people at the time said to me, this will change you, you'll be a different person, you've gone through this life-changing experience, and it didn't really have that effect on me. I just put it down to I did a stupid thing, it was bad luck, I suffered an injury, I healed, and I just got back into life. So I haven't come out of it with any great epiphany or changed really anything I do. Yeah. I don't slide down banisters, obviously, anymore. Yeah. I get very annoyed when I see people swinging on the backs of their chairs because that's caused a lot of broken necks as well.
Here I am, leaning right back on this chair.
I got to know the nurses very well in the hospital over 13 weeks and learned a lot about the causes of these various spinal injuries. So if I see someone leaning on their chair, I'll tell them off.
Well, thanks for telling me. Yes. That's a hazard. Very good. So let's go back earlier to the start of your career and what got you into law in the first place.
That's a good question and probably a slightly unusual path for me. I grew up in Rotorua and I attended Rotorua Boys High. And as I said earlier, my debating coach or my English teacher got me into the debating team, and we went to Australia and we debated some schools in Australia, and I really enjoyed that. And then that same teacher suggested I should apply for an AFS exchange. And I didn't really want to do it. I was having a great time with my mates in Rotorua, and he just kept pestering me to apply for this AFS scholarship or AFS program. So I applied just to get him off my back. And as I got further and further through the process and had an opportunity to potentially get an exchange, I got more and more interested in it. And then I still remember getting home from school in 1988 and had a letter from AFS in the letterbox saying, "Congratulations, you've been selected to travel to Connecticut, USA for an AFS exchange program for 12 months. And I was really, really excited. I had no idea where Connecticut was, but I got the atlas out and figured out that it was about a centimetre from New York on the map. So I rang my mother at school and told her that I'd got this exchange, and she was very excited, and off I went, and I lived in Connecticut for 12 months. And it was a 45-minute train ride into Grand Central Station, New York, so we spent a lot of time in New York City. So for a boy from Rotorua in the 1980s to be living in New York for a year was just phenomenal. And I lived with a host family, and my host father was a lawyer, and he was an employment lawyer. And he would charge contingency fees. So once he had a big win in an employment case, he would take 33% of the award. And he would always come home and say, "The ship's come in today," and off we'd go out for dinner to celebrate. Yeah. And I did a bit of work for him, mostly just clerical work and photocopying and sending faxes and whatever else you did in America in 1989. But that really got me interested in the law. And I could see how much he enjoyed it. So I came back to New Zealand and decided to enrol at law school in the University of Canterbury. I had been all through the states over 12 months. I had visited something like 26 states. I went all through Canada, went skiing at Whistler Mountain over Christmas. I was really, really, really lucky to get all these experiences. And then I came back to Rotorua and thought, well, I haven't actually been to the South Island. I'd never set foot in the South Island, so I better go to university in Christchurch. Yeah. And went to enrol at law school, and they wouldn't let me in.
Really?
So I turned up at the enrolment day and said, "I'm here to enrol for law." They said, where's your bursary? And bursary was a thing back in the 80s that
Yeah.
you'd get at the end of your high school.
Like
seventh form.
NCA level
Yeah,
3
that's
kind of
exactly
thing.
right. And I didn't have it. And the reason I didn't have it is because I went over to the States for my exchange in August of my final year at school, because the American year obviously starts after their summer. So I left school in Rotorua without that final qualification. And I had the university entrance from the previous year, but the dean of the law school in the University of Canterbury in 1991 said that's not enough. You need an A or a B bursary, so you have to go away for a year and do some other subjects, and if you can come back in a year's time with a B average, then we'll let you into law school.
Wow.
And I had graduated with honours from this prestigious private school in Connecticut, and thought I had all the qualifications, but it wasn't enough for the professor. I won't name him because I'm still bitter all these years later. But then I went away and did some quite interesting subjects like sociology and psychology and American studies, philosophy, and then I came back and got led into law school. And that's where my passion in the law, I guess, developed from.
Isn't it interesting? And it's probably a bit different today when an educator can look at the different fields or the different experiences that an applicant has had and make a decision or an assessment on their suitability for a qualification. But probably back then it was a lot more myopic and short-sighted, in that you had to have this box ticked in order to proceed into something.
And that's exactly what happened, and it cost me a year because I obviously then had to do 5 years instead of 4. So that's why I joke when I say I'm still bitter about it, because I did manage to get a double degree since I was going to be there for 5 years anyway. But you're completely right. They should have looked at the bigger picture and actually seen that the qualifications and the experience that I had in this amazing AFS year should have qualified me to let me in.
So you didn't practice in Auckland. You stayed in the South Island.
Yes.
And practiced there. What made you stay there? Did just new experience?
I had my first child at about the age of 25. So just as I'd finished law school, Phoebe came along, and so we were obviously going to stay in Christchurch and raise the family. And I thought, with my degree, so I had an honours degree in law and a double degree majoring in political science, and I thought I would be able to get a job relatively easily, but that wasn't the case at all. I would walk around, I bought a suit, I had a lovely fashionable dark green double-breasted suit back in the day that was very fashionable, and I couldn't get a job in Christchurch. I walked around the streets and knocked on all the doors of every single law firm in Christchurch at least twice. I had a little notebook and I'd write a little note about who I'd seen and what they had said. And the message I was getting very regularly was, we need someone with 2 years experience.
Wow.
So come back when you've got 2 years experience. And it was just so hard, because how do you get 2 years experience? No one would give me a go.
Yeah.
And the other message I got quite regularly was, what school did you go to? So Christchurch in the 1990s was very much, and probably still is, all about where you went to school. And I ended up saying, I shouldn't reveal this on a recording, but I ended up saying I went to Boys High. Because
You're in the club.
We called Rotorua Boys High, but that's what they called Christchurch Boys High. And when I ended up getting a job, an opportunity finally with Simon Mortlock, he happened to have gone to Christchurch Boys High.
Oh, there you go.
I don't think he employed me for that reason, but yes. It was tough. It took me a year to get a job, basically. And then once I got an opportunity with Simon, I stayed there for 24 and a half years.
Yeah. And here you are now. Couldn't find a job, and now you're president of the Law Association, meeting with ministers and politicians. So that's quite a transition.
Yes.
I said we weren't going to talk about the law, but of course we are. And your role as president of the Law Association, and I guess the time, what you've done in your time in that role. What has been your, I guess, greatest achievement, or what you've been most proud of since you took on that position as president?
That's a really tough one. There's been so many things that we've done. I think one of the significant changes that we've made has been the name. So when I was first elected to the council 7 years ago, I was practicing in Christchurch. I'm now practicing in Wellington. And if I had $1 for every time someone said, "Why are you the president of the Auckland District Law Society?" or "Why are you on the council of the Auckland District Law Society? You don't even live in Auckland," then I'd have quite a lot of money. And so we changed the organisation's name initially from the Auckland District Law Society to ADLS. And I thought that would be enough because I thought ADLS will become just a brand in the same way that ASB Bank is. And even people in Christchurch bank with ASB Bank, but people in Christchurch wouldn't bank with the Auckland Savings Bank because they would think it's only for Aucklanders. But that still wasn't enough, so we changed the name to the Law Association last year, and that's been really, really successful. And I think we've got a really, really good position in the industry now that we can leverage off and support all lawyers throughout the whole country. As the Law Association. So I'm really proud of how we've done that. I'm really proud of the growth in our membership. So we've gone from when I joined the council, we had about maybe 3,800 members, and we're now up well over 7,000 members.
Wow.
We've nearly got half of the profession as members of our organisation, and I'm really proud of that because what that tells me is that we are really doing something right and we're doing some great work supporting a lot of lawyers, and we're looking at growing that number even more. And I don't want to get fixated on the number, but I see it as a really good reflection of how well we're tracking and how good an offering we have for our members.
And what's been the biggest challenge so far for you?
Probably, I would say, having to deal with some difficult stakeholders, including members. There's a handful of people that dominate a lot of your time. And I'll give you one example, and that was around the name change. And there were 2 or 3 of our members who had been members of our organisation for a long time that just got really stuck into me and our council and our CEO and were quite nasty. They were just saying really horrible things.
It's interesting that you said that exercise was lacking, and I think that's probably the case for a lot of lawyers and their work-life balance and their family obligations and being so busy, especially at certain times of the year. Is that something you find with your colleagues and peers? Is the idea of exercise a priority in order to, I guess, be the best lawyer you can be and have that balance?
Yeah, I think so. I think the mental health aspect of it is really important because I know in my firm, for example, there are people that work long hours and it's a stressful job. And we deal with a lot of problems that we're required to solve. And so we take on a lot of our clients' stresses often. And so I think from a mental health perspective, that can become really all-consuming. So it's a difficult job, a complex job, and a stressful job. So to then have some exercise and have the opportunity to actually get physical exercise, but also get away from the stresses of the office. One of the things I really loved about marathon running, and I don't get quite the same level with the golf, is that I didn't have my cell phone and no one could contact me. So if I was off running for 3 hours in the forest or wherever I was, then no one could find me and no one could bother me and no one could ask me to do this or to do that or to sign this or to authorise this or... So it was that feeling of freedom. So I think the mental health side of it's really important as well as the physical health.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you what your plans are for the Law Association and the work you'll be doing. What does that look like for you? What are your big objectives over the next period? What's important and what do you hope to accomplish?
There's no real 1 or 2 things that I can point you to and say this is what I hope to achieve. We are going through a bit of a sort of a strategy reset at the Law Association at the moment. And what we're looking at becoming is the leading industry body. So we want to represent the legal industry. So we want to go further than just representing our members and the professionals that work in the profession. And we want to go further. It's a subtle difference, but we want to go further than representing the profession, and we want to represent the industry. So we're talking to a whole lot of other stakeholders that are not law firms, that are not lawyers, that you might not think are directly part of the profession, because they're not. They're part of the industry. So we want to become, and we are at the moment the largest independent representative body for lawyers in New Zealand. And we want to grow that. So as I said, we've got about 7,500 members. I would love that to grow into 8, 9, 10,000 members. I would love to focus more on junior lawyers as they come up through law school. So we're doing some work with AUT. We do work with a lot of the universities. We supported the University of Canterbury Law Students Association with a couple of their functions earlier this year. I was a little bit biased in choosing Canterbury as the first University Students Association to really focus on, but we want to roll that out through the whole country. Because we're finding that a lot of lawyers are falling through, or not falling through the cracks, but they are leaving the profession after 2 or 3 years. And we want to support them and show them that there is a pathway either to partnership or to whatever that looks like for the younger generation. So we want to just provide a whole range of services to a whole range of lawyers and industry players throughout their career.
Yeah, we've covered that topic quite a bit. I think the issue of the exodus of young lawyers from the industry, and it is a massive problem. And I suppose there are multiple ways you can address that, by presenting the opportunities in terms of partnership, but also, I guess, the value-based approach with law. I was just at the Youth Advocates Conference last week, and the passion in the room for that type of work was just palpable. There's so much drive to better represent young people, and a lot of the lawyers were doing it just out of it probably can be a lucrative field, but a lot of them were just doing it out of passion.
Absolutely, yes.
And I feel like that's probably a really viable opportunity for a lot of young lawyers to keep them in the industry. This is something that really is valuable, and it's worth a lot.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just on that Youth Advocates Conference, I was there as well, and there were 8 judges in the room, and they were just fantastic. And so I was really proud of us as an organisation to be able to provide that opportunity to, I think there was 80 people altogether in the room, to provide that opportunity for FaceTime with these amazing judges.
Yeah.
The passion in that room and the aroha in that room was just, as you say, it was palpable. It was fantastic. And these are the things that I really love about this role, that I would never have got the opportunity to attend a youth advocates conference. I'm a commercial lawyer. I do leasing work for the government. I don't do youth advocate work, but just to have that experience, it sounds cheesy, but it was really inspiring.
It was, yeah. Especially the stories. There'll be stories on Law News coming out about the conference, but I found the stories from Northland just so amazing, how they're working together in this kind of cohesive unit to really get round the gaps in the legislation and patch it all together so it works well.
And these are genuinely passionate people who are doing a lot of this work without any pay whatsoever. They're doing it because it needs to be done, and it was phenomenal. And it really broadens your views, and it makes me feel privileged to be able to have that opportunity and to realise that I'm actually representing a really, really wide, broad cross-section of our industry.
Yeah, that's great that it gives you that opportunity to, I guess, get out of your field, which you've trained in, and be exposed to all aspects of the legal sector. And there's so much good work that's been done behind the scenes that you wouldn't normally be exposed to, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm really lucky too to have a fantastic counsel. So the Vice President is Julianne Kincaid KC, And we have passionate criminal defence lawyers like Samira Taghavi as well. I think these are fascinating people who are really, really, really passionate about their part of the law. So we have a really good cross-section of experience on our council, so we can represent I know I keep saying it, but represent the whole industry in a really effective way.
Yeah, and you'll be able to help all those young 25-year-olds in double-breasted green suits who are walking around Christchurch, can't find a job.
One piece of advice I would love to give, though, is to polish your shoes.
Yeah, that was a question I had for you. What's up about that?
It's so having walked the streets of Christchurch for 12 months and knocked on all these law firm doors and got rejected, I eventually got an opportunity with Simon Mortlock, and Simon Mortlock had been a partner of Anthony Harper, and Anthony Harper he was a partner of Harper Pesco, and they merged with Anthony Paulson, and the firm got bigger and bigger and bigger, and Simon got to the point where he was walking down the corridor, this is while I was still at law school, walking down the corridor, and he would bump into someone and he didn't know if they worked for the firm or if they were a client, and he said, I don't like this size of firm anymore, I'm going to start my own business. And he wanted to employ a graduate because he wanted to take someone on who had not developed any bad habits or any habits whatsoever, and he decided to take a graduate on. And he rang his brother-in-law, who was Professor John Burrows at the University of Canterbury, who was a legendary figure at the University Law School. Yeah. And he said to his brother-in-law, John, I'm going to set up my own practice. I want to employ a graduate. Can you recommend someone to me? And dear old John said, Simon, we're not allowed to. The university policy is that we're not allowed to recommend individual students, so I can't. But if I was you, I'd have a look at this Tony Herring and gave one other name. So Simon interviewed the two of us, and Simon's lovely wife Belinda Mortlock attended the interviews as well. And there was nothing to choose between me and the other candidate. And Belinda said to Simon that this Tony Herring had polished his shoes. He turned up with very highly polished black shoes, admittedly accompanied by a green double-breasted suit that I'd got from Hallenstein's for $300, but the shiny shoes got me the job.
Fantastic.
He takes care of his appearance and he takes care, so attention to detail, you should employ him.
That should be the Law Association slogan.
That was my big break.
Shiny shoes.
If I hadn't shone my shoes that morning, I might, who knows where I'd be, Michael.
Oh, that's awesome. Love it. Well, thank you, Tony. It's been great chatting with you. Thanks so much for sharing. It's been really interesting as well. And all the best for the rest of your term.
Thanks very much for having me. I've really enjoyed this discussion. This is another opportunity that I have never thought I would ever get, and an opportunity that being president has brought to me. So I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's great. Our pleasure. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. Subscribe to InFocus, a TLA podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to connect with the Law Association, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, X or Instagram, or visit our website, theLawAssociation.nz. Mā te wā.